and a slam jam.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Wombo Combo Podcast. As always, I'm breakycpk, joined by BSJ, and another week is upon us here to talk some more competitive Dota 2, and definitely a bit on the docket today, so including some, you could almost say, breaking news that took place yesterday. We'll get into that in a moment, of course, but looking forward to some more good discussion happening today. But as always, first things first, BSJ, it's over. You made it. You made it through the gauntlet of Dota 2 matches. How's it going, man?
It's not too bad. Just slowly settling in. Surprisingly not too exhausted, but just kind of weird to not have to wake up at 4 a.m. and cast for a bajillion hours. So kind of just on the resettling of the equilibrium, you know? So,
I bet, man. It's, again, you were at that gauntlet for grind quite a bit, whatever you want to call it, 3+ weeks, but back to normal life, which is streaming Dota 2, right? So that's how you're doing right before this. So
pretty much going from one type of Dota to another type of Dota.
Exactly. So as mentioned, of course, we will be starting talking about that ESL event, one last time for yourself, I'm sure, but kind of wrapping it up. But of course, later on in the show, we're also going to be talking about that breaking news, as I mentioned. Peter Pan Dam, PPD, well, Franzi, some even call him, way back in the day. He's announced his retirement as of yesterday from competitive Dota 2, and so we'll give our take on the situation and what it's all about, as well as a takeoff of that. We'll be giving our top list, potentially even top 5 lists of best captains of all time within Dota 2, in homage to, of course, his announcement of the retirement. So that should be a fun discussion to have later on in the show, and look forward to that. So, but yeah, ESL, man. ESL officially wrapping up with that European CIS event. Of course, the one that you were grinding out over there. And let me pull the tab again real quickly, close it on accident. There we go. All right, so ultimately, the winning team, Virtus.pro, taking it in the end. It did go 5 games. It did go the distance in the grand finals against OG, believe it or not. OG, of course, getting there themselves. Ended up being a great grand finals and ultimately a great finish, as expected. But I remember, BSJ, in last week's show, you were even hyping up the fact that Virtus.pro's looking really good. And sure enough, here they are. They win it all in the finals. They take this event.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised. I don't want to say a bit surprised. I was very surprised that Secret kind of just bombed out in the playoffs. They actually went 0-4 in their 2 series that they played. One of which was to, I believe, Viking GG, who ended up getting 3rd, but ended up getting stomped by OG in the lower bracket finals. Virtus.pro, I was already trying to be a bit blunt on my honesty. I thought ILTW kind of got carried. If you watch the games, I thought it was like the Rezo no one show. I think the supports did fine. Like, I think Ziyech did a great job, like, implementing his heroes like Enigma and Techies. They were really using his, like, cheese heroes from the 4 position really well. Obviously, Solo is just the captain and does a solid job. But to be honest, it really just did look like the no one in Resolution show the entire time. Like, either one of the 2 of them just completely took over the game every single game. And I'm not trying to necessarily bash on ILTW, but a lot of me kind of believes that any high MMR carry could have been plugged into that team and they would have won that specific tournament, because OG was playing with some stand-ins, and then Secret ended up bombing out. So, which, amongst all things, it was very impressive to me what OG did. I said I was almost more impressed with what they did, because Sumail was on high ping. They were obviously playing with stand-ins. So all things considered, that the fact that they took the best of 5 to a 3-2 and also even made it to the grand finals was pretty cool to watch. The Dota itself was great. It's obviously a bit frustrating to get back into pubs, like I talked about a bit last week, where you like have this vision of how the game's going to go. You've been watching professional Dota for the last 3 weeks, and then you're just in pubs where your team picks 3 invisible heroes.
Yes.
You're like, oh, shit. But yeah.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of ammunition out there, no doubt. It's towards Virtus.pro and kind of getting to your point a little bit as far as, do they really deserve this, whatever. Yes, they did. We've talked about this event, how
Absolutely.
this is the only event right now. I mean, there are other events that are happening, and we'll get to that actually later on in the show too. But this was the big event. This essentially replaced what was going to be the major, of course. And obviously, it's not the same feel, not the international style event, not the LAN event, but it essentially was that in a lot of ways. Yes, the teams are using ringers. Again, like I go back to, there's ammunition, there's excuses that can be made. I mean, you even look at the playoff run that they had to take. They had to defeat Team Spirit in the first round, and then they defeated OG twice to ultimately claim the title. You mentioning Team Secret being the big bombing out there, but that's not their fault. They beat who they had to in front of them, and that's exactly what they did. So, but yeah, to say, it obviously not in the hands of ILTW, or you could have perhaps placed another carry in there. I mean, we are talking about No One and Resolution, two of the better core players that we've seen in a very long time, certainly. And when you almost say it like that, it's crazy to think it's taken this long for VP to look this good since their days of being the dominant VP that we've known them in the years past. So obviously I don't want to overhype and overexcite from this event, because I do think it's fair to analyze and look at the road that it took to get here, and take into consideration what this event was with other teams and everything. But it is good to see, for the sake of Virtus.pro and knowing the potential of this team with the roster, that they were able to claim the title. So definitely deserving for them. But I'm with you too. Really, Viking.gg. Let's talk about them for a second, because obviously this is a team that you would go into this event and probably not even expect to get them out of groups, let alone get third place in this event, including knocking out Team Secret along the way. Just to clarify, because frankly, I just confirm myself, and I'm sure there's many out there, the roster of Viking.gg is Shad, Boom, Toby, Aramis, and Celery. Those are names that you think about when we're talking about top-tier European CIS Dota 2 competition. So they did barely make it out of groups, it's worth reiterating. They got fourth place in Group A with a 4-3 overall record, 8-8 I guess overall, but 4-3 series record. They squeaked through, but hey, they were able to climb all the way to third place before getting knocked out by OG. But to me, I guess the point here is it's really cool to see teams like this that, in a sense, came out of nowhere in a lot of ways, in such a big event, and kind of make a name for themselves.
Oh yeah, that was kind of the highlight for me. Them and Chicken Fighters. Chicken Fighters got fourth, and they got third, obviously. I think Boom was a pretty huge come out talent. I think if he can refine his laning stage, he'll be a top tier player. He was kind of like a mediocre laner that just always did well in the mid game. Like every single game, he would be slightly behind in mid, and then he'd just go 10-1 and 20 or something on Queen of Pain was his signature hero for the tournament. So if you're looking to learn Queen of Pain, definitely a player to watch from that last tournament. On top of that, Shad, their whole strategies kind of revolved around Shad with like Alchemist, Lycan. They had Boom play Broodmother. They were a lot of cheese picks, but they were... I respect cheese picks. I think it's really hard to play cheese picks properly. It requires the entire team to work around it, adjust their play style, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't always the same player on the cheese picks. So it was a very big team effort. They had the coach, I believe his name's Immortal Faith. We had him on an interview a couple times. He was very excited to work with these guys. Basically just said, hey, they listen to me. We're all humble. We're just trying to learn and get better. And you can tell in their play that they were, over the course of the tournament, their drafts were getting better and better. And they were able to even beat Secret. They beat OG, I believe, in the group stage. So just a very hats off to their effort, despite having a rough last day. But it was really cool to watch the growth of teams like this.
Yeah.
From my perspective, being watching every single game.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've already talked about it a bit in previous shows, because at that point even they're really disappointing. But teams like Team Liquid, of course, bombed out, didn't make it to the playoffs. Nigma did have a bit of struggles themselves. They had lost to Chicken Fighters, the other team, kind of almost surprise team that you're talking about, getting knocked out in that first round of the lower bracket themselves after getting at least to the playoffs initially. So a couple of those bigger name teams that maybe you expect more out of, not able to do too much. And Alliance, certainly another one as well, earlier on, expecting a bit more out of them. Now, obviously, they went through that roster change, so maybe not the expectation of a bit more out of them. It's more of what were we going to see? And they ended up, where did they got knocked out by Viking GG, in fact, right before then they went on to defeat Team Secret. So, yeah, they too got knocked out in that first round of the lower bracket. So, there's that kind of recap there in case you didn't miss any of the matches. Give you an idea of how it played out. But again, they were playing for that $200,000 prize pool, and Virtus Pro taking that first place portion. So one more time, big congratulations to them. The event as a whole, though, I mean, I know as far as commentating it and everything, it was definitely a long event. We've already talked about all that, but were you happy you did it in the end now that it's over?
I have no regrets. I kind of said I just wouldn't do it again, probably. Like if I was told, hey, you're going to do 12 hours of casting every day for 24 days straight, would you do it? I probably wouldn't do it again, but the experience itself with the guys I did it with, we talked about that a bit last week, was just, it was a pleasure to work with all of them. It felt like a very rewarding experience for everything, for everyone involved. And it was a bonding experience in the sense that obviously it reminded me kind of like football when I was in high school. When we were all doing like 2-a-days, like near the playoffs, and the grind was just real, and you're just going through this really tough experience together, and you all learn and grow together. And that's in that way, it's like a bond experience that you'll just never forget. Like I'm sure if I randomly talk to Blitz and Grant or Cap, 10 years down the road, we'll be like, hey, remember when we did 24 days of casting in a row? So in that way, it was pretty great, but no regrets. Wouldn't do it again. TLDR.
All right, fair enough. But speaking of all those matches, of course, from it, we got a lot of data, to say the least, as far as getting an idea of some meta trends. And you've already hinted at a couple things. One of the more maybe surprising heroes that jumped up throughout the event, that Queen of Pain, was picked up a fair amount. She ended up somewhat in the above average place, but just a couple of stats that maybe stood out. Of course, the most popular one, in fact, the most popular hero that was picked, Grimstroke, was the most played, had a 48% win percentage, so as you'd expect, around that 50%. But then shortly down the list, one of the more played heroes, a top 10 played hero, had a 68% win percentage with that Keeper of the Light up there. It's, again, whenever you see a top 10 hero with that 65-70% win percentage, you're like, huh? I mean, maybe a little too powerful right now once again, so Coddle's back, baby.
Yeah, that hero was in the right hands just completely broken. The Chakra Magic was really what defined the hero. You could just double slide a fist on Ember Spirit. Any hero like Pangolier that has mana issues suddenly also has 2 swashbuckles but no mana problems. Yeah, the hero was just way too good. I think Grimstroke was less good but very good anyways, and since it kind of got read through every single game, obviously having a 48% win rate if it's like first rounded every single game is pretty good. And Keeper of the Light was banned almost every single game moving forward. So the Blinding Light was just a little too busted as well. Like the whole idea of like a save in the landing stage, he kind of countered all the other popular supports like Tusk. Whenever you tag team, you Blinding Light him. Whenever you Grimstroke Inkswell, you just Blinding Light the guy away. So it's just very not only is the hero very powerful in its own right, but it was also very good against what was good. So I think that's kind of like why it had such a high win rate.
Yeah, very fair. It's something I always like to look at, especially for an event like this when there was so many matches played amongst similar teams constantly going at it. And I think it's a good way to help understand maybe where the meta's at. There were 4 heroes that actually were not selected at all, despite all of these games. It was like 330 games were played. There was 4 heroes that were not picked, and I mean, we could play a game where you could guess, but I'm just gonna go over them. So the 4 heroes that weren't picked were Chaos Knight, Clinks, Tinker, and Visage. So you look at that list right there, and I always find it interesting when Tinker specifically is not, because he seems like one of those heroes that like, oh, there's gonna be that one team that wants to play Tinker and draw out a game or whatever and win with Tinker, but not picked at all in these 300 plus games that were played in this event. So of those 4 heroes, anything that you'd like to add?
I think Clinks is kind of like just a worser version of Ricky. Like they're both like Invis assassination heroes, so he's just a worse version of him. Chaos Knight, kind of just a worse version of all the other illusion carries. Like there's just, the thing that defines these heroes is that there's just never a game, it feels like, where they were the best pick. So nobody's ever gonna pick the hero. Also with Tinker, it's just not a turtle meta. Like, I would say even Sniper was a hero you hardly saw at all. But the difference between like a Sniper and a Tinker is that Sniper can still offer some sort of offensive early game push if you want to like group up as four and have the Sniper in the back sieging. But Tinker is like 100% on the defensive for the first 25 minutes of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And in the current meta right now, that just doesn't fly. Like, it's just not going to work. So despite Tinker being like a very player specialist, as you said, usually a team will whip it out. The hero's kit just doesn't fit how the game is being played right now. And what was the fourth one?
Visage.
Yeah, I'd say he's just like a worser version of like Beastmaster, like, and like all these other summon heroes. I think you'd just rather have their summons than Visage. I think his laning stage is also too weak. I think a lot of the games, especially with the new patch, are decided in the first like 15 minutes. So if you have a Visage who's, I would say, loses their lane 90% of the time, one of like the weakest laners in the entire game, unless it's like a tri-lane support, and then you have like a support Visage. I just think for Tinker and Visage, those two heroes just don't fit the meta, and for the other two, they're just worser versions of other heroes.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Dahak wasn't. He's of course playing for NIP, and that's something else we'll talk about here shortly. But he was known as that Visage player for Gambit last year, so that would have been one maybe you could have expected. But again, not played at all. Not played at all. One of those four heroes that was not touched. So, any other stats? I don't know if you have them in front of yourself, but anything else that you wanted to bring up before we move on?
Not really. I think a lot of it kind of explained itself. I thought what was really cool was like certain heroes like Centaur, who are super popular at the start of the tournament. They were still picked some, but simply like one or two heroes coming into as like a solution to them made them no longer spammable first round. Like Tusk and Invoker were two of the most notable Centaur counters. And I think if you were to watch the tournament in full, you'd learn a lot about how fragile the balance of Dota is, because there's this hero that's getting first rounded every game, and then suddenly it's getting countered by these fourth, fifth picks that just ruin it. And since the bans in the first round don't really warrant you banning those heroes, suddenly this hero's just not very good anymore. So I really did like that aspect, and there's a lot to learn from if you watch tournaments like that in their full, but there are definitely trends you would never notice if you weren't watching every series. So for me, that was a cool aspect. I was trying to bestow that knowledge upon anybody who was tuning into the stream as much as possible, but the fact is I think it's just really hard to gather that information for yourself unless you're just watching every game.
Yeah. All right, so the event, good event, long event, but had some good Dota. Again, very consistent Dota at a pretty high tier level, and that's as fans, that's simply all we could ask for, right? So definitely props to you and, of course, the team at BTS for putting all that effort into work to commentate on the said event. I suppose ESL as well. It was their event after all. So despite BTS, of course, taking the reins as far as production goes when it came to the English coverage, at least. So good event in the books, but I think that means we can move on to our next topic now. And again, as yesterday earlier on, had no clue that this was going to be something, but it's one of those things throughout the week. Sometimes this bigger news comes out, and it's one of those. This certainly fits because yes, we've had players. You know, they've announced retirements. Certainly in Dota 2 history, there's been some big ones, but this is arguably one of the biggest retirement announcements that we have ever had. I think you could say Peter Pan Dam, PPD, officially announcing his retirement yesterday from competitive Dota 2. There is a quote right here, so I'll just read through it real quickly. He says, and I quote, I've spent just about the entirety of my 20s competing in video game competition, and at this point in my life, I'm almost 29, I'm looking for something else that I do not think I can find in my current position. Today, I find myself focused on personal growth rather than competitive versus others, and because of that, I feel like I have lost the grit and ambition necessary for myself to be the competitor I'm comfortable being. I don't feel bad about it, as I believe change is a healthy, and I'm eager to do something amazing and new in my 30s. I'll be forever grateful for the people who believed in my abilities and saw the potential that I always believed I had, no matter how objectively poor things may have looked in any particular moment. And then he goes on to thank the fans and everything. So End quote there. So yeah, that was PPD. Essentially, you hear that. It's basically him saying, not that he feels like he's too old for it, but he is he's lost a lot of his passion, his drive, and frankly, it's I don't want to make this sound bad because I definitely don't mean it this way, but as somebody that kind of knows him behind the scenes as well, it's not surprising to me. And I mean that because he is doing a lot behind the scenes and he has been pursuing more business opportunities behind the scenes. Going back to his EG days where he eventually became the CEO, as we know, of the company, and then that whole interesting time where then he wanted to play again, and then eventually left the organization there. So, but he certainly had ambitions to do stuff behind the scenes, and that's what it sounds like. That's what he's looking to pursue now. Now, what exactly that is, don't know, but obviously in due time we will see. But yeah, your thoughts, BSJ, when you heard this announcement and he's retiring?
I can't say I would have predicted this happening, but I talk to Peter a decent amount. I see him at events all the time and stuff. It's hard to explain, but when you talk to No Tail about Dota and then you talk to Peter about Dota, the passion between the two is very distinguishable, and you could just tell that what it takes to stay at the very, very top is just a pure love and just consume your life with Dota. And I don't think PPD wants to do that anymore. I could tell I could kind of get that vibe from him for the last year or so. And I think it kind of showed in his team's results. I think it showed when he did interviews, he seemed almost skeptical of his own team, in a way that was funny kind of, but also I don't think you want that as a captain. I think his impact on the scene has been incredible. I'm not trying to I hope none of this sounds like I'm demeaning Peter. I have nothing but respect for him. I think he's accomplished so much. He's offered so much to the scene as even with NADCL and obviously bringing NA from the precipice of the abyss or whatever you want to call it, the cusp of the abyss. I don't know. Other than him, you have maybe SVG. Who's the other NA captains, right? You can't count Fly, and yeah, he's kind of an honorary one, right? But not really. It's a sad day, but I think it was kind of coming. So I think I speak for a lot of people and just say I really look forward to seeing what he does, and I hope to see it. Meaning, if it's in something esports related or whatever, that we'll get a chance to follow his transition to whatever he chooses to do, like you said, in his 30s. Yeah, these are the type of moments that make you feel like time just flies and nothing's permanent, and it's hard to fully process someone like him just not being in the Dota scene anymore.
Yeah, it does. It for me personally, again, I'm sure people know that with my history with him as far as the Han days go, I met him way back when we're talking about 2011 even time frame. And to think that that's almost been 10 years since I've been able to not only know him in his competitive gaming atmosphere, but seen him develop as a player and a captain over that time. And frankly, earlier on, especially, I mean, he was, how do I put this lightly? He was an asshole. As many of these gamers were, especially when they are younger. He's always been somebody that's not afraid to speak his mind, and there is definitely moments where that showed a lot more. Again, I go back to earlier on in his career. Now, as obviously he's gotten older, matured, however you want to put it, he's still not afraid to speak his mind. But I think he's certainly done it in a much more respectful manner at times, and it's been awesome to see that growth. As far as, again, him being a captain, obviously his accomplishments, we're talking about a TI winner here, and yes, it goes back to what he's done for the NA scene as a player and as a leader, but also as I go back to behind the scenes too. This is a guy that he tried to organize these in-house leagues consistently multiple times, and that's something else, and he's always been an advocate of supporting the tier 2, tier 3 Dota scene, amateur Dota scene, whatever you want to call it, and trying to make sure that, we're not at a place in Dota 2 where we have these players that we have right now, and then, what's next? He from my talks with him, at least from what I see from him, he is certainly somebody that has a vision in helping to make sure that the development of the game will be long lasting. So again, he hasn't announced anything official, but I really wouldn't be surprised if his next endeavor at least is are more attempts to help facilitate more the amateur side of the Dota 2 scene especially. So I look forward, certainly, as I'm sure many are curious as far as what his next steps are. But yeah, officially retiring as of yesterday. Now, just this has been brought up already by many, and my personal take on this, what I'm getting at is, we've seen esports players retire before to then come back months later, weeks later, even at times a year later. It could happen. It certainly could happen, obviously, if the right opportunity comes up. But this really is one of those that I just don't know if I see that taking place. I think he's fairly content with this decision. We're talking about a player that's made over just about $3 million in prize money, according to his Liquipedia. I mean, that's obviously a good chunk of money. Help support himself, and I know going back to the whole business side of things, certainly has made some good investments, I'm sure. And we'll see ultimately in the end. But yeah, future is up to him, and it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up as a non-player now moving forward. So, anything else to add?
I'd say that I definitely don't think he's coming back. I think that's like, he kind of did his whole stint with EG, like you said, and there's players that you're not 100% sure if they mean it. It even applies to other professional sports, but I can just feel from him, like you can just tell that the competitive aspect of Dota, he cares about real life. Like, Peter is a pretty well-rounded guy. Like, that's the big thing, is you can tell that he cares a lot about personal relationships. Like, I'm not just talking like girlfriends or anything, but just like developing like business relationships, friendships, like being a well-rounded person. He wants to see things and like not just be consumed by Dota. And there's nothing wrong with either side of this, but I just don't think he fits the bill of somebody who would play forever. And that's really all I have to add. I think he will always have a stamp in this game, and I hope, like you said, that he continues to participate with Dota in other ways. But I guess the future will just have to tell us that itself.
A topic that we've talked about a couple of times more recently is, the idea of coaches even, and you got to kind of wonder if that's a possibility. A team going into TI coming up or future TIs, obviously you got to think PPD's on that very short list of, hey, we're looking for a coach. You want to help us out here? So that's certainly an avenue I could see him still being involved in. But because again, from what I understand from the quote that he gave, it's just as a player he is retiring from competitive Dota 2 there. So. All right, so official retirement announcement. So as mentioned earlier too, we figured a fun kind of take on this announcement here that we could make of this, a fun discussion to be had, is top captains of all time, because it goes back to PPD. Certainly is one worthy of mentioning when you're at least thinking of putting a list together. And figured why not give out other names. And see, for me, it's like putting in a top list. I'm sitting here thinking, like, I suppose I could try. I might be able to give at least like a couple top couple, but I don't know if you yourself prepared much for this. But
I right when I see the question, I can think of several names. There's the obvious ones. You have Puppy, you have Kuroki, the ones that not only have won TI at some point, but also are remaining on top teams as captains, and pretty much wherever they pop up, they are top tier captain. I'd probably just prefer to go by region. Like, the first person that stands out to me, it's usually somebody that's on the top tier teams. Like, for me, it's Jabs from SCA. Somebody who's not necessarily always appearing on teams, or sometimes he's a coach, but Zhao 8 is like the big one from China for me that always stood out. Like, if you think of a Chinese captain, you think of Zhao 8. And then from Russia, I think of Solo, or like CIS, I think of Solo. Obviously, like, it's not as a coincidence that the teams they're always on. FMG comes to mind. But these players, like, if you look at the top 12 or so teams in the world, the captain is what remains the same. And you look at SA, and they're starting to have captains. Even like Layla's kind of come out of nowhere. like when I think of Beast Coast, like I don't really think of their captain, so it's kind of different there. But it's just really cool because I think of SVG when I think of NA, I think of Fly, partially when I think of NA. But it's not really like a secret answer. It's kind of beautiful in its simplicity of the fact that like these guys are all on really good teams and they're always on them. So
Yeah.
the answers kind of should just be right in front of you. No tail, obviously. Like, it's to make sure I don't.
I was gonna say that if you didn't, so
yeah. So in case that's like the obvious, like sometimes it's kind of like when somebody says, "What's a good hero here?" and you don't see the hero list of 120 heroes. It's like hard to envision all of them, but
yeah.
No tail, obviously. Yeah, I think captains define competitive Dota, so you'll see them on pretty much every top team. The top captains.
Yeah, absolutely. The consistency is a big thing. It's a good way to make solid judgment of how truly effective their leadership is in captain role. And I think that's fair to sit here and have the debate, the argument that's like, oh, who's your top three or who's your best captain of all time. It's almost kind of silly in a sense because they're great for their own reasons. Like in my mind, I see No Tail and Puppy as you could definitely interchange them on a list or however you want to put it, but their captaining role, the ways they go about being a captain certainly feels a bit different, right? We're talking about No Tail is a little more freedom, a little more lighthearted, a little more fun side. At least this is all from the outside perspective, and a little bit of relationship I've been able to build with a couple of these players. Again, No Tail being one of them from the history there, but he's certainly, again, just more of this fun, joyful guy. We've seen it in the videos and everything. And when it comes to even the drafting, definitely more team-based, etc. Where Puppy, on the other hand, he's had his history, right? We know. We know about the monitor and everything. We know about the strictness that it seems like Puppy really brings to the table. And, hey, it's definitely had its own results, to be fair, as well. So whether or not you're critical of the way he does things, it has been successful in the big scheme. Now, obviously, he hasn't won the TI there yet, but working on that. But you as far as other captains go, Kuroki, then you kind of think of what he's about. He's very not outspoken, right? He's very calm, very cool, calm, and collected. I certainly think is a good way to put it. So he was definitely another person that I had on my list as well. One other name that I don't know if you mentioned, but mentioned Xiao 8, of course, from China. Another Chinese captain, though, FY, I think, is certainly one worthy of putting up there, especially more recent years with LGD and, of course, Vici Gaming before that. So he definitely would have to be another one of consideration there for a list. But yeah, solo, as you mentioned, Fly is an interesting one because I can see there's a lot of people out there that would be critical of Fly with the whole OG drama that took place, but obviously he had massive success with OG at the time, was considered the captain for them, has been considered the captain for Evil Geniuses, and even though they haven't, again, won TI, they've certainly had some amazing results themselves. So, and I also would put him on this recognizable list because, as I always go back to, the Hondays as well. He was an amazing captain, considered one of the smartest minds back there as well. So, and then one that I found myself, I'm like, God, I want to be biased, but it's hard to really vouch to put him on this. My boy Melons, I've always respected what he's been as a captain, but yeah, it's tough to put him on this list. But I think it's an honorable mention at least worth putting out there. So
yeah, he's obviously had a pretty massive impact on the Dota scene in general. So whether or not it's partially as a captain, but also as a caster, it's an analyst. Definitely one of the household names of the Dota 2 scene, so nothing wrong with throwing him on the honorable mention list.
By the way, I completely misspoke right there. Puppy's won a TI. I don't know what I was thinking. He won TI 1, obviously. For some reason, way back when, man. You know what's interesting about TI 1? I was actually at TI 1.
Really?
I was at Gamescom. That it was at in Germany. I was there for a Han event. And man, wow. Yeah, times were different back then. I was there with, who was I there with? I was there with Hani and Overpow. I don't know if those are names that you recognize, but pretty old school Dota 2 players.
Hani.
Yeah, Hani is very old school back in the early Dota days even. Overpow, so not as recognizable, but definitely it's had success. And they were helping us run our Han booth. And again, we remember hearing about this $1 million tournament and wondering, what's going on about it, what to expect. And I definitely walked over there a couple times, heard Toby casting, and the setup was a solid setup, but they were having a lot of sound issues, and obviously this is a very early stage of the game with minimal heroes in and everything. So I was like, all right, this is cool, but we'll see where this ends up. Well, it ended up pretty damn good in the end. So.
Yeah, I remember seeing the hero pool for TI1 being like 40 heroes or something. Anti-mage every game. I think Anti-mage Doom every game, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
a little bit different, yeah.
Dota's come a long way,
and seeing people like Peter retire just reminds you of that kind of stuff, right?
It does, BSJ. It really does. It goes back to again, I'm still young in the big scheme, but in the esports side of things, and just it is kind of cool though to be able to say that we've been around esports, Dota 2, whatever you want to say, for this long as well. So, it was certainly a reminder of that, but it's also a reminder of there's still much more to come. Much more to come, Dota 2 esports and it all. So excited for the fun times ahead. Including more Dota 2. Because we've talked about how ESL is obviously what was kind of the event and everything, but to be fair, and you go to the Wikipedia page, you certainly can see that there's a lot of these events taking place. I think more and more organizations are stepping up or realizing that, okay, not a whole lot going on in the LAN scene, obviously. Let's make a point to run these events. So we've already talked about a bit the BTS Pro Series at the Americas region. They've been throwing on that event. So a quick update there. That's those 8 teams from South America and North America. Of course, worthy note is that Evil Geniuses, they are running with a couple of stand-ins, Ryoya and Bulba, in place there for Abed and Ramses. But Team Crazy is actually 6-0 series record, 12-2 in the group stages. They are right now in a dominant first place position in the groups. Of course, it's then to qualify for the playoffs, so still more to come. But it's kind of fun seeing Team Crazy all the way up there, especially when they got a couple of players over from Europe competing on their team.
You dropped Eternal Envy +1, and you got European players, and you're suddenly pretty good.
Just had to throw. How is Cloud9 doing? Okay, Cloud9 stepped it up a little bit, BSJ, so we got to give credit where credit's due. They're 3-4 now, so there you go.
I'm at the end of the day, I'm kind of memeing, but at the same time, like, it's not too shocking that roster. Like, I think Kezu's a nice, strong voice for a team. I think Skeeter's like a pretty up-and-coming Dota player or from the carry role. I'm pretty sure I've heard some questionable things about his, I don't want to say like toxicity, but his like mentality. So I think that's something, if it can be worked on, he has a lot of upward potential. So I just think like a team like that could really use some foreign influence. And Browl's one of the few mid laners in NA that if you have, like, if you're against CCNC and you don't have like Bryle or like Sumail, you're kind of just like, well, I guess I lost. So, yeah. So I think overall it's not too surprising, but to be quite frank, I haven't watched any other Dota than
that's fair.
Than the 24 days in a row of the ESL line. So, yeah, I haven't actually watched like why they're doing good or what have you.
But they're on top right now. There's only 1 day left. It looks like actually tonight. Oh, no, so there's 2 days left. There's tonight and tomorrow. So Tuesday and Wednesday, and then the playoffs start shortly after that. So yeah, again, BTS doing coverage of that with their commentating team there, and you can keep an eye to see how that plays out. Crazy, as mentioned up top right now. We also have Quincy Crew, Evil Geniuses, Business Associates, the top 4 that make that right now. Another event that obviously the Chinese Dota scene, we don't follow it as much as a region over here, but it's worth pointing out. I mean, the Chinese Dota 2 Professional League is going on right now. Their season 2, as they put it, and you got all the best teams in China competing in this online event. They have this 10 teams, in fact, playing it out, and they're week 4 right now. They do this more kind of almost traditional sports format where, every single week, each day, there's like 1 series, maybe 2 series that they play. So They definitely are spreading it out. But yeah, just wanted to mention that it's worth checking that out in case you weren't aware. Of course, depending on the time zone there, and some good Chinese Dota 2 going on.
There's a lot of stuff going on. If you're somebody that wants to be watching Dota right now, I even saw a Reddit thread that was just like, wow, every time I turn on Twitch, there's a league game going on somewhere. So
yeah,
it's pretty nice for that. I think right now is a nice indication of what next season, whenever that may start, will be like.
Whenever that may start.
Yeah, and I assume it's going to start at the end of TI, and when is TI going to be?
I was going to say, I hate to say it, BSJ, not to bring up bad. Man, it's like if TI happens, I mean, TI is going to happen, right?
I'm 99% sure it's going to happen. It's just like, is it going to happen next year? You know, when is it going to happen? That's fair. The huge question mark in the air. I don't see why they would skip a TI. I guess it could effectively lead to skipping a TI, where it's like, you know, the TI is in like beginning of next year or something. Maybe if the world pandemic really does last that long, which is quite possible, you know. It could literally just be skipped, where TI 10 is suddenly next year.
What about like TI region based? So what if they just pull an ESL in that sense and are just like, dude, you know what?
I think that would be so fucking lame. I'd rather like have nothing than that. If you could do something like that, but do not call it TI.
That's fair.
Do not call it TI. So.
Yeah.
If they want to do that, whatever I'm pretty sure whatever can be done in the meantime is going to be done. It sounds like, from what I heard while I was at the event in ESL, like all the studios are trying to gun for having their own tournaments. They're not fighting, but like organizing and settling in for like who's going to do what, when their time slots are, all that kind of stuff. So, I can only say that the Dota economy isn't going to hurt too much. It's just a matter of what it's going to look like in the meantime.
Yeah, and to your point that these events kind of popping up, this is one that popped up out of nowhere for me at least, and I'm sure several others, but We Play is always solid on throwing these events. You and I both worked for them. I love working with them, and yet again coming through with some more awesome Dota coverage here. They're picking up right after ESL, where they have the European and CIS regions. The dominant teams in those regions are competing in this event. I'm double checking on that. Yeah, pretty much every. You got Secret, Virtus Pro, Nigma, OG. They're all in this event. So it started yesterday, I want to say. I believe it started yesterday with their. So they actually have two divisions. So that's what they're doing here. They got their main division, then Division 2. But point is, yet another event to keep an eye on, and this one actually has a $250,000 prize pool. I mean, they're
all pretty decent size for sure.
Online tournament, $250,000 prize pool. That is, it goes back to, man, it's crazy how far we have come along. I remember when mouse pads for third place were a good prize.
Mouse pads.
Times have changed, man.
For sure.
But yeah, so that's fun to see. So you had another bigger event, and again, you head over to Liquipedia. And also, by the way, quick shout out to juked.gg. Speaking of all this esports in general, let alone Dota 2 happening, that's a fantastic site. And I know we're on the site as well with our podcast, but it's a fantastic site for keeping a schedule of everything that's going on, and it's also a great way to, you just go to the site and you're like, oh, here's this tournament, so it organizes it very well. Definitely, I would recommend. I wasn't even asked to say this. Frankly, I think they're a good service. So, check it out if you would like.
He was paid to say that, guys.
I might have been. We won't talk about that. All right. I think that pretty much covers it, though, for today. Not anything else, unless, as always, BSJ, going to give you a chance if you have anything else. I'm going to refrain
from any rants this week. Had a solid rant last week, and maybe it's time for people to get a break from it.
You get some good feedback on that rant?
People came to my channel saying, like, appreciated the rant, or like glad you were honest about it or whatever. But yeah. I think rants only have the amount of impact they do if you don't do them all the time, you know?
Yeah. No, and it was real too, which I think is important. Like it was genuine, and I think that's good.
Yeah. It's just funny because like when I'm casting and stuff, there are a few series where I just shit on one of the teams where I'm just like, wow, that was just such a bad series. Like, and I'm like, I don't think this means anything if I say it a lot, but if I say it twice throughout the course of the entire event, I would hope that carries some weight that I was, thoroughly disappointed in that team for that series. So To be fair, though, at the end of the group stage, I know you're a Liquid fan. I guess the last thing we can say is Liquid did look pretty strong. Blitz seemed pretty confident, too. He was like, we don't suck. He's like, we just didn't figure out the meta yet. We're not trash. Like, don't worry. We'll make it back. So going for you there, I can tell you from the inside scoop that they're pretty confident despite their terrible results at the start of the group.
Oh, we figured out the meta for this big event, and we got knocked out in the group stages. Oh, by the way, a patch just came out today. Yeah, in case you didn't see that, or for those that are tuning in.
7.268.
Yep, that came out today. So I was actually just scrolling through it real quickly. I mean, obviously, there's changes in here. We're already running a little bit longer on this episode, though, so don't want to really get into it too much.
I think it'll be better to talk about the changes and what they mean in about a week, because it's really hard to tell what anything
Good point.
means exactly. So.
We'll save that for next week, and obviously another week of Dota will be had then, and give us a better idea, too, as far as how it all impacts everything there. I think we're good then. I think we're good to start wrapping things up. So as always, ladies and gentlemen, want to thank you for tuning in. Subscribe to the channel, follow the channel even, say YouTube here. But follow the channel, subscribe if you would like. It does help support not only our podcast, but the prediction podcasts in general. And from myself, breakycpk, as well as BSJ, the Wombo Combo podcast. We'll see you next week. Have a good night.